we've just begun. We got
rap, or rip it to the rip it to the rip, rock, rip it to do.
Oh, no, honey, no. No, that's okay. Okay, you can stop now, okay?
Maybe I'm rough and tough and all that, yo. And I ain't gonna be taking none of the...
Fool, sit your ass down. Stressing.
Hello viewers, you've just been seeing footage from my next guest, which is Jerry Minor. Now Jerry, as well as being a comedian, also happens to be an ex-Jehovah's Witness and has dabbled and continues to dabble in ex-JW activism. So it's an absolute thrill to speak to you, Jerry.
Hello, nice to speak to you, Lloyd.
So nice weather there, by the way.
It is nice here.
And I guess the best place to start is to ask you how you got roped in with Jehovah's Witnesses.
Well, I wasn't born in, but my mother came into the organization when I was around 7 years old. I have an aunt that was a Jehovah's Witness. I don't know when she got involved with the organization, but my mother did. She started studying with the Witness just prior to right around 1975. Then I was like 7 years old. She got baptized a few years later. And then I was baptized as a young man, 17, 18 years old, I believe. So yeah, that's how I got familiar.
Okay, so you weren't quite born in, but you might as well have been because, you know, at 7 or 8 years old, you're just going to go along with what you're told. So once you were baptized, what was your experience as a Jehovah's Witness? Was it favorable? Were there things that went badly for you? What happened?
It was really tough for me. So I was baptized, would have been around 1984, 85, 84, I believe. I think my experience is a lot like, yours, a lot of other people's, except it wasn't that long. I started pioneering at a young age, right at the time I got baptized at 19, right after I graduated high school, or before I got baptized right before I graduated high school, and then immediately started pioneering. So that's my senior year. And within 2 years, I was disfellowshipped and out of the organization. Now, I started to become disenchanted with the whole organization because of the problems that I and a lot of my friends were having. I just saw them dropping out for various reasons. And then when I saw them drop out, a lot of times you don't get the story. You don't know what happened. You find out that your friend that you were friends with for, 20 years is now disfellowshipped, and you don't know what the story is. You haven't talked to him. And so that was happening to a lot of my friends. I also had a friend that died not taking the blood transfusion. I can't say that he died from refusing the blood transfusion, but he did refuse the blood transfusion, and he subsequently died after that. It's possible that he wouldn't have survived anyway, but I was also really bothered by the way that I thought he was treated as a martyr.
Treated as a martyr, you mean? Yeah.
Yes, yeah. His mother, his family members on district assembly parts. I just didn't like that. It's something that hit home to me, and when it hit home to me, it was a personal friend of mine. It felt exploited. It felt weird, and then also knowing that it wasn't necessarily a thing where he lost his life because he didn't refuse a blood transfusion. It may have saved him, it may not have saved him, but that was what was presented to us at the parts and at the conventions, and that just hit me the wrong way. I think a lot of things just hit me the wrong way all at the same time. I was pioneering very hard. I also had friends who were graduating high school, and I was told that this was the best life ever. I don't know if they were using that quote back then, but I had these friends that were going to college that were worldly, that seemed to have a much better life than my friends who were Jehovah's Witnesses. They weren't. They didn't have problems with depression. They didn't have problems with suicide, and that's part of my story too. Part of my story is that I tried to commit suicide at the prospect of being disfellowshipped.
Right.
I survived, and I know that I tell my whole story in your. I don't know how much you want me to tell in this.
Yes. So viewers might as well know that Jerry is being interviewed or has been interviewed for the Truth About the Truth documentary that I'm working on. So that's what Jerry is referring to. But you know, we can repeat as much as you like.
Sure.
We're not under any restrictions there. So that's quite a lot to unpack.
Sure.
First of all, you were pioneering, like you say, straight out of high school. Am I right in saying that this was back in the day when it was 90 hours a month?
Yes, it was. Yes.
Yeah.
Auxiliary 70, regular Pioneer 90. Yeah.
Because I actually caught only a few months of that before it switched down to 70. So I very briefly kind of got the experience of doing 90 hours per month, and I remember that being quite punishing. So you were quite full into it, and no doubt immersed in it for at least a couple of years, and then you say you see your friends dropping away.
Yes.
Are you able to tell us? I mean, when you say you got disfellowshipped, did you just kind of want to walk away from the organization because of what you were seeing, or was it more complicated than that?
That's interesting. You know, I think it was more complicated than that. For me, it was just a really depressing, emotional time. I'm not sure what was going on in my mind, but you know, so when I dropped out, I ended up committing immorality, as they would say. But it really felt like, to me, it was just an act of defiance.
Yeah.
But also an act of, like, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep this life up. And so this is my last day of life, and I'm just going to give up and take my chances in Jehovah's grace in the new system. You know, and also the theology being that, really, if you really think about it, you have a better chance dying in this system, or this is what I thought, and not committing some horrible sin and getting disfellowship than trying to live through this system. So for me, I just thought, this is too difficult. Jehovah will understand. I can't do it, and I would rather. I know that that I have a chance of being resurrected if I die before the end of the system. So that's what I tried to do.
And the attempt was before you got disfellowshipped, was it?
Yes. My attempt was right after I committed the sin.
Right. Right.
So the same night. Yeah.
And in your mind, you were thinking that was a way to kind of fast track through to the new system.
Yeah, I was. I mean, you keep in mind this is a very depressed state.
Yeah.
You know, at this point, I'd already been publicly reproved. I had my privileges taken away from me, so I couldn't pioneer anymore. I was also working for other Jehovah's Witnesses. I was cleaning at night. So I had no prospects for employment because I'd been doing that for years. I had no skills. I hadn't gone to college. So it was just a really tough time for me as a young person. I also grew up in the town of Flint, Michigan. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Anybody wants to get familiar with it, you can watch a documentary called Flint Town on Netflix, and you can see how depressed that community is. So there was also that backdrop that was making life really tough for me. So it was just too tough, and I thought that the new system would be a lot better.
Well, I'm just glad that however things turned out, whatever the exact circumstances were, and you don't need to go into them, I'm just glad that it didn't work out the way you planned.
Survive, right?
Yeah, exactly. You survived, whereas many people don't in that situation, of course. And we never, once they do commit suicide, of course, we never hear exactly what the reasons are unless they leave a note, and they don't always do that. So
that's right.
I think it's very brave of you to be open about that.
Yes. So it took a while.
Yeah, I can imagine. So having hit rock bottom, how did the road shape out from there?
The thing is that my mother was divorced from my father, and pretty much it was me and her, and the organization Jehovah's Witnesses had kind of created a wedge between my family outside of the Jehovah's Witnesses and my family in. So at that point in time, it was just me and my mother. I was still living at home at 19, and my mother put me out. I don't know why. I would believe that the elders probably told her that you have an adult living at home. And I know there was a policy at one point of when you do have a disfellowship child, they could bend the rules a little bit as far as talking to them and things like that and dealing with them if you have a minor child living in your house. But if you have an adult child, I don't know what the rules are. And I'm not sure because I haven't talked to my mother in any substantial sense since I've disfellowshipped, but that was over 30 years ago.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I just have not. My mother is a Uber dub. Yeah, we haven't had any kind of substantial conversations since I was disfellowshipped.
But she did turf you out of the house.
She did ask me to leave. Fortunately for me, I did have family that were outside of Jehovah's Witness, and that I could turn to them, even though I had been kind of disassociated them for a few years. I did have my dad to turn to, and I lived with him. Went to college, and was very quickly able to get myself back on my feet. I say quickly, being that I was able to get to a point where I didn't want to kill myself.
Yeah.
But it still took years to heal from all of that. This was a very traumatic experience for me.
Well, again, I appreciate you being open about it, but it's and I'm sure that there'll be many people watching who can relate to it as well, which is the disturbing thing, because this organization does have this impact on people. So you having been deprived of higher education, because of course you said that you pioneered straight out of high school, you then basically go back to that, and it looks like things kind of took an upward turn from that point.
Yeah, well, first of all, I lived, so things for me started to change once I stopped going to the meeting.
Right.
So
were you trying to get reinstated for a while?
No.
All right.
So in between the time that I tried to commit suicide, it took a few months. I was in the hospital, obviously. And in between that time, obviously I'm not going to the meetings. And so for me, I felt like I kind of woke up then. By the time I was released from the hospital, which took a few months, I did not want to go to the Kingdom Hall anymore. They waited until I was able to get out of the hospital, and then I had a judicial committee probably within weeks after getting out. I don't remember the brothers ever visiting me while I was in the hospital.
And on what basis was the judicial committee?
Well, I tried to commit suicide.
So they disfellowshipped you for trying to commit suicide?
And also for immorality, but yes, that was one of the other reasons.
But they'd already reproved you for that, hadn't they? So
they'd already reproved me for that, yeah. Well, I had another instance too.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
So,
but pouncing on someone a week after they've made it out of hospital is, I can't understand how they can think that's appropriate.
Yes, Lloyd, that was part of my whole disillusion.
Yeah.
With the whole organization is the way that I was treated, because at some point, I have worldly people who aren't supposed to care about me, caring about me and telling me, you want to live and you should have a reason to live. And I have the other people who are supposed to be offering me everlasting life, not even talking to me and seeming like they want to distance themselves from me. And it really felt, Lloyd, like I was, the suicide was even more of a problem that they just did not want to deal with. They did not want to be responsible for. And they wanted to get me as far away from this as possible. And also, Lloyd, I became aware of the fact that I didn't know this before I was disfellowshipped. I thought that while you're disfellowshipped, that the elders would still talk. I knew that, a regular rank and file can't talk to you. I didn't know that no one can talk to you. I thought that elders would still work with you. I was a depressed kid. I assumed that I needed help. I needed work. And was told that no one would talk to me and I could just write a letter in 30 days. That really opened my eyes to what the organization was. And all of a sudden, my personality just switched. It was like another part of me, a survival part of me took over and went, wait a second, this whole thing might be wrong. And I'd never looked at it. And all of a sudden, it was like a whole house of cards fell. And for me, it was like, well, maybe this flood thing is crazy. And maybe this whole story they're trying to tell me, this Bible story is crazy, And from then on, I never looked back. Never went to another Kingdom Hall meeting. Never even thought about going. Obviously, I still had phobias and fears, but I was determined to see what life was like beyond the Jehovah's Witness view. And that really worked out for me. I'm really glad I did that. But I also was lucky and fortunate that I had help with a family, my dad's family.
Yeah, not everyone has that, but
Right.
and like you say, there is that dynamic as well when you are a Jehovah's Witness, that you kind of look down on family members who don't believe like you do, and
Yep.
and you allow yourself to kind of drift apart from them. I can remember it happening with me, even with family members who were witnesses. If I didn't think that they were kind of trying too hard in the organisation, or I thought that they might be bad association, I just allowed them to kind of drift and distance myself from them. So
I've told that to so many ex-witnesses now, years later. I'm like, I wouldn't have hung around with you when we were witnesses because you would have been bad association. I would have been able to tell you, I would have counseled you and told you, all of us aren't going to make it in this system, and you might be one of those,
It's astonishing when you look back what you were capable of doing.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
The way you can treat people, yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about what it's like to go from, as I say, rock bottom and all this nonsense with disfellowshipping to being a celebrity and a TV star. What's that like?
I really don't think of myself as a celebrity. For me, I think it was a part of grabbing onto the only other personality that I was able to have. So when I was in school, I was a clown, class clown, all the way up through high school. And it really made it difficult for me that was one of the ways I could get along with people because being a Jehovah's Witness was really difficult. My mother really forced the doctrine in all of my life, so I wasn't able to, do any extracurricular activities and sports, and even extracurricular activities that were deemed appropriate by the society. Those, to my mom, at times were still troublesome. So I was in marching band in high school. And my mother took me out because I missed too many meetings and I wasn't going to field service enough. And I thought, at least it's not football or basketball or baseball, which I'd love to play. And I was one of those kids that, I would just, I loved sports. I know you talked about that. I've heard you talking about loving football. I loved American football, in the United States when I was growing up. I loved basketball, and I'd play with the kids in the neighborhood. And every year, when it was time to try out for the team, I'd find myself in the gym, just kind of hanging out after school, knowing that I couldn't, join the team, but at least just I could have a few moments to play with these guys, go to the tryouts. And I don't think there was a time that I was ever after school playing basketball with the team that my mother didn't come in and drag me out of the gym. There's a couple of times where I was a couple of days into practice and my mother finding out that I was trying out for the basketball team, she'd march right in the gym and pull me out of my ear. Very embarrassing. So yeah, I didn't have that. I think that, at the time when I was disfellowshipped, I grabbed onto that part of my personality that wasn't a Jehovah's Witness, that I was able to relate to people without being a Jehovah's Witness, and that was comedy, and that was, clowning around. So within a week of me being disfellowshipped, it was something that I always thought that I could do. It was one of the only other things that I knew I could do, how I could relate to worldly people, was making them laugh. So within a week, I was out trying to do comedy, trying to do stand-up comedy. I just went to a stand-up comedy club that was in my area, walked in and said, "Hey, how do you do this?" And I think at one point, I remember very quickly after being disfellowshipped, that was my material because I didn't know anything. I would talk about what it was like to be a Jehovah's Witness. And how
well, there's an abundance of material there, isn't there, really?
Right? Yeah, well, there's abundance of material there, but then there's also like the part that the only thing that people know is that you bothered them, at their door. At least back then, it was more house. The work was focused more on house to house. And yeah, I just did the thing that I knew how to do, and that was it. And that kind of worked out for me. I enjoyed it. It still took me a while to look at it as a profession. I still had that part of me that had grown up with a witness that thought that this was a frivolous, I just had the idea of being in entertainment as frivolous and sinful, I guess, you know. So it took me a while to think of it seriously. I was like, no, this is a career, and this is something you can work at, and it's a skill. You can get better at it. So a few years after that, I did, and I was able to get involved with a theater company called the Second City that's out of Chicago. A lot of people from Saturday Night Live went through, able to go through this kind of training program and learn a lot of skills and then make it a career.
Fantastic. And it feels as though, like you were saying before about getting pulled out of the sports at high school,
Mm-hmm.
it feels as though you were always kind of moving in that direction, and then finally after getting disfellowshipped, your authentic self was just able to kind of take flight.
It took a while for me to be able to realize that, because I was still a quiet person. You know, I don't even think that I'm an introverted person, but I think my experience of being a Jehovah's Witness made me that way, because you have to be. There's so many times you have to check yourself. You have to check your own thoughts. You know, and it could be anything, you know, that an elder could counsel you on and make you feel bad about. So I think that was for me also, being able to get on stage. There are no rules. There's less rules even than just in regular life. So I was able to curse and swear, and it's all okay. You know, I was able to bring out all these parts of my personality, and I was able to also be different people, to experiment with different personalities, because I'm just acting. It really helped me out a lot, and also it was, like I said, the only other things I knew how to do, and also public speaking. I will say that one of the only good things that I learned being a Jehovah's Witness, the first time that I did go do stand-up, I bombed. I got booed crazy. And it meant nothing, because I've been disfellowshipped. So like, I know what rejection is like. And I also know what it's like to stand up on stage and be boring. So,
yeah.
I can't say that that experience of being able to get up and talking to people, and also trying to woo people, trying to talk to people who don't want to listen, kind of primed me to be able to do that.
Did it ever play on your mind that by doing shows like Saturday Night Live and the various other projects you've been involved in, that you might pop up on your mother's TV, and what might be going through her mind?
Yeah, that's another reason why I still do this. And the reason I do this activism is because, there's people that I know that in the few conversations that I've had with my mother, there are witnesses who see me on television, and they can see at least that I'm doing okay, that I am not a drug addicted, worldly person. I'm a married person. I feel like I live a moral life. I'm good to my fellow man. I do charity work. I take care of my neighborhood. I just had a son born to me. I don't cheat on my wife. I live, to me, a much better, more moral life than I did when I was a Jehovah's Witness. Well, I know I did. I don't do the things that I did when I was Jehovah's Witness.
Well, so long as you don't crave the annihilation of everyone who doesn't agree with your beliefs, I would say you live a more moral life.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So you've at least got that one sorted. Crazy.
Yes, yeah. I had a hard time with that even when I was a Jehovah's Witness. I was having family members that weren't witnesses and trying to talk to them. And you end up insulting people, but you're not insulting people. Just when you talk to people and you say, well, I just want you to live forever. And, if you don't have a callous attitude that these people just don't want the truth and they're just hard-hearted, then you really do feel for people. These people are all going to be destroyed. And if you really think about all the people that will never, ever know anything about Jehovah's Witness. I've been out of the organization for 30 years, and the majority of people that I've come across have no idea what Jehovah's Witnesses believe or what their message is or anything, and could care less about them. So knowing that, knowing what it's like on the other side, or even thinking about that when I was a Jehovah's Witness, if you really think about that, you really have to harden your heart to carry on, knowing that millions of people are going to be destroyed. And they really don't have an opportunity to learn about the truth. Now, the thing that I told myself when I was a witness is that well, they'll just be all resurrected. But if you get destroyed in the end, there's no resurrection. So I guess I just assumed when I was a witness, like there's going to be a lot of people around we're just going to have to do this all again. We're going to have to just preach the word all again because there's going to be a lot of people who have no idea what the truth is. I mean, when you really realistically think about it, the resurrection is going to be the majority of people going like, what happened? I'm back to life. What's going on? You know?
It makes no sense, does it?
No.
Just thinking about the fact you mentioned that you've been out of the religion now for 30 years. Obviously, my experience with coming out of the religion's quite recent, and you know, the internet played an integral part really in me waking up. So I'm just interested in what it was like for you to wake up in, say, the 80s, 90s, and what resources you were able to draw on back then before Google.
Wow, none. And that's what really made a difference in my life now. I felt like, you know, since the you know, there were a few resources and very early on in the internet. I think there were some people in, I can't think, Finland or something, you know, there was but I still had the feeling that if it was something that was apostate, that I guess I felt like it was biased. I still had that phobia of looking at apostate material. So through all those years,
so you still had a few hang-ups left over, when you left,
Even though I was said like that, like you know, when I left, I thought the first thing I thought was Jim Jones, and I would tell people, I'm like, I think it's kind of like that Jim Jones thing, and people go like, well, they're not drinking Kool-Aid, and they're not off into, you know, they don't have a compound, like. Yeah, they do. Just not all Jehovah's
Lots
Witnesses
of compounds, yeah.
They've got them. They got a big one. And they keep building on it. It's like, and they would go like, well, they haven't asked everybody to go move to another country. And I'm like, well, not yet. You know, before Jim Jones took over that church, it was a different place. Before he decided to move his congregation to Guyana, it was a different kind of church. It was thought of positively in the San Francisco community, you know. And then he decided to go crazy. So I thought, you know, if this leadership changes, if they decide to do something, if, you know, at that point, I think Frederick Franz might have still been alive. If he decides that, hey, you know, we all should all be in New York and everybody should all huddle together, they would do it. That was my thing. It's like, I don't care what they've done. They will do this. Because if my mother is not talking to me and she was asked to put me out and she does it, if these elders who know my situation intimately would still decide not to talk to me just because it's policy, then these people will do anything. And I hadn't put together a cult, and I hadn't even looked at any information that put that kind of thing together. I just thought, you know, that's my opinion. And I just felt like this is my opinion, and I'll stick with that. And I still, like you said, had hang-ups or whatever and phobias. And some of those phobias, a lot of those I hadn't even put together as, oh, this is something that I learned there. That was something that I didn't put together until the internet. And so I started looking at other people's experiences, and I started to look at other cult experiences too. I didn't know anything about Scientology. I didn't know anything about Mormonism. You know, I didn't know anything about, you know, I knew about the Jim Jones cult, and I put those two things together. But then these other bigger organizations, I thought, well, those are, you know, whatever, religions or whatever. The more I started to know about that kind of stuff, and there's a few Scientologists I knew here in town, the more I started to put that together too. And that kind of stuff really did change my life. I really do say that, you know, the reason that I'm married now and I have a child now, you know, I lived my life. I wasn't a Jehovah's Witness, but I still didn't trust people. I still had things that I had to heal from. You know, I had trauma that I had to heal from. And when I did that, it made my life a lot more enjoyable. And that's just been in the last 10 years.
Wow, fantastic. And another question I wanted to ask is, it feels as though just in the kind of few years that I've been awake, and I woke up sort of around 2010 and got involved in activism a year later, and it feels as though just since that time there has been an increase in the amount of exposure on the TV and in the media and that kind of thing, and it feels as though there's a little bit of momentum gathering now. Have you noticed a difference between since you first woke up and today in terms of the reputation that Jehovah's Witnesses have?
Yes. Now, it's not like Scientology, and of course I'm here in Los Angeles and seeing, how, for years and having friends that were Scientologists and it not being, the word not being out as dangerous as it is, and then now seeing it kind of explode in the last couple of years. Yeah, I have seen that. Now, the word about Jehovah's Witnesses hasn't gone to that degree, but yeah, people like you, YouTube, that has made a huge difference. Because, it used to be leaflets and little pamphlets and things that people may get, the crisis of conscience, Now that the internet, through the advent of the internet, I was able to get a PDF of the crisis of conscience, something that I probably wouldn't have done, to get up and try to go find it at a bookstore or the library is just a little bit too much effort. Now that I can either order it on Amazon or find a PDF of it, made it a lot easier for me to look at that. And that was something I just looked at 10 years ago, and I was like, if I'd have saw that in 1984, done. I'd have been gone. If I'd have just reading the paragraph of them taking a vote, if they took votes on policy, I'd have been like, okay, that's it.
Yeah. I was very lucky in that reading Crisis of Conscience was one of the very first things I did. So that kind of was like a massive wake-up call right away, reading that. And
now you were a little...
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You were a little younger when the book was actually published, right?
Yes. When it was first published, I would have been only a small child because I was born in '79. And it came out in the '80s, didn't it? So I was only a small child when it was published. In fact,
so you don't remember then the actual time.
And I actually make a point in my book that the apostasy purge and the rule change on disassociation came in 1981 when I would have been 1 or 2 years old. So, and I would have had no way of knowing, obviously, at that age, or even indeed when I was older as a Jehovah's Witness, quite how it changed then and what impact it had. Yeah.
It had a huge impact. For me, it even had more of an impact because I wanted to go to Bethel. That was my, goal in high school. And the reason I didn't go was because of health issues. But one of the other reasons I think, too, is like this, when I was looking to go to Bethel, that's when this purge was happening. And I remember when he was disfellowshipped. And I remember people talking about it. And I remember people saying, I remembered a story from a brother who was on the judicial committee and him telling, because I was really curious, like, what was he saying? What were these earth-shattering things that he had said? And I remember what a brother telling me, it wasn't that crazy.
Yeah.
They weren't that crazy things.
Fred Franz said crazier things on the Gilead graduation. That's the ironic thing.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, he was into the anti-type kind of stuff, the prophecies. I remember listening to some talks of his when I was a little kid.
Fred Franz gave a talk at a Gilead graduation where he basically debunked the entire concept of the governing body, which I don't know how you can get more apostate than that. But he ends up being the president. It's just crazy.
Well, listening to stories of people that were around Bethel then, they kind of see him as he was the sage, but he was also thought of himself as a serious Bible scholar. And so, he wouldn't present, which is another thing was the dishonesty of that organization is that, people that knew him, he would present himself as well, maybe it might be this, or maybe it could be this, but he didn't present himself as that way to the rank and file, but to the other brothers in the governing body. They were constantly thinking about and rethinking their policy and their theology, just a little honesty would have went a long way for me.
Yeah, a little bit of humility, yeah.
Brothers, maybe we don't know, but this is what we're thinking. Maybe that. But then you don't get a lot of members doing that. You don't get people who stay.
Indeed. So, I've heard a little bit about you kind of revamping or rebooting a podcast. Can you tell us more about that and what activism work you're getting involved in at the moment.
Yeah, I recorded this podcast, and at the time, my initial thought was I just kept running into people in the entertainment industry that were either ex-witnesses or familiar with it, most of them being that they grew up around it or grew up in a household where they were witnesses, and I thought there was some kind of connection. I think in the years since, I've learned that there's just a lot of people that have come across this. You know, it's kind of like, I don't know how you're familiar with Amway and where you're at, but it's kind of like that, where there's this thing that a lot of people have it's just spread. It's viral, you know, and you'd be surprised at how many people have been in contact with this thing and have let it go. I think the majority of people that come in contact with witnesses, or majority of people that have been just leave it. And they're done with it. And there's a few people that stick with it. And you wouldn't know that unless you have these conversations with people. And so I just, started having conversations offhand with a lot of people in Hollywood and finding out their experience. And so that's a part of the podcast where I talk to a few people, or even talked about my experience and talking to people. There's a comedian now who's really doing well, Tiffany Haddish, who's in my second episode. She actually had the experience of growing up in Jehovah's Witness, as a Jehovah's Witness, and when she left home, she had experience with the Church of Scientology. So she had both. I asked her about the differences. Her thoughts on being on the Jehovah's Witness are a little different maybe than ours. I don't know if she's thought about it as much, but it's interesting to hear her thoughts about it. I mean, she wasn't maybe as involved as we were, but she has some interesting thoughts about it. But the podcast talks about my experiences and then some other experiences with people in different cults that I've met around town too. So, and I'll be going into the last. I'm going to be finishing the last episode in the next coming months. So I wanted to do a revamp and just get people more familiar with the first two episodes.
Fantastic. And what's the podcast called?
It's called The Truth with Jerry Minor. Yes.
Fantastic.
Familiar with that terminology, and it's on Stitcher Radio. You can find it on Stitcher Radio. It is a paid podcasting service, but my first episode you can download for free.
Fantastic. Well, that sounds brilliant, and I'm sure that you are a wealth of gossip and stories from the side of Hollywood that's impacted by cults. We could probably do a whole other show just based on that.
It's funny, just to talk about. Well, there's the other side too. Now there's people that are still Jehovah's Witnesses. I've actually run across a few of those people too. And I can tell you, not much of an experience, but there are a few people around here that are still Jehovah's Witnesses, or that are Jehovah's Witnesses that are in the entertainment industry.
Wow, amazing. Which is really paradoxical, isn't it? Because everything about being a JW is supposed to be about shunning the world and avoiding, even if you're in a house that's too big, you should think about downsizing to something smaller. So how you can justify being a major celebrity and a Jehovah's Witness, I have no idea.
Yes, well, it used to be, I wanted to talk to Prince before he died, and I was an alumni of Saturday Night Live, and so when he was in SNL, I happened to be in New York and tried everything to get tickets for the show. Got to the show, and I just wanted to talk to him and ask him, because I'd heard all these rumors about him being a Jehovah's Witness, and then I'd seen a couple of interviews and videos, and I just wanted to see. I just wanted to talk to him myself, and I just could not that night get close enough to him to ask him about being a Jehovah's Witness, and I really regret that. And he died a year later.
A year later, wow.
Yeah. But boy, I really wanted to. He was the one guy that I wanted to get to and just ask and see, what his thoughts were. Talking to other people who've talked to him, it seemed like he had his own idea of being what being a witness was, and was somehow allowed to do that. And that's something that I've recognized too with the people that are witnesses, that are celebrities, is that they seem to. I used to say that it wasn't like Scientology where they seem to have different rules than the rank and file, but that seems to be the case.
I think even ordinary Jehovah's Witnesses do that to some extent. They kind of invent almost their own version of the religion. So I encounter Jehovah's Witnesses in my YouTube comments all the time, who are kind of debating me on stuff that I've said, and they're saying, "Oh no, you've said that all wrong. It's actually this." And I'm like, you either don't know your own religion, or you're completely inventing your own version of the religion, which is fine, but just don't pretend it's the official religion, you know? So.
Well, I don't know if you remember when being a witness, there were people, I mean, and maybe it was a little bit more when I was older, we'd get the occasional person who said that they were anointed, or, who held on. There were people also who held on to old teachings, that the Watchtower had abandoned, and who would say, no, I'm holding on to this. There's still a king of the north, And,
I'm holding on to the Great Pyramid teaching. There has to be some truth in that.
I knew some older ones who were from around Rutherford's time who held on to some stuff like that.
Yeah. Amazing. Jehovah lives in the Pleiades. I know it. I feel it.
I don't care what the governing body says.
Fantastic. Now, I just want to, before we wrap up, I just kind of want to bring things full circle, because obviously I'm sure there are lots of people watching this who maybe don't have the joy that we have at having escaped. Maybe they're still in it. In fact, I read a comment only this morning from a 13-year-old who seemed really depressed at being a Jehovah's Witness and feeling forced to go along with that kind of lifestyle. As someone who has been through that experience and, again, hit rock bottom when it comes to depression and mental health, what would be your advice to a Jehovah's Witness watching this who is struggling emotionally?
Yeah, get help. It took me a while to be able to get the help that was pointed, and a lot of times I think that I felt like people didn't understand because there was something special, and so I wouldn't talk about being a Jehovah's Witness. I think that help is out there for you now, and I think if you can, if you look and you research it, there are people who know this experience, people like us, and there are professionals too who are becoming aware of what this experience is like for people. And I will say that there was a time that the professional community, the community that could help us, didn't know a lot about these kind of issues, but I think that they're becoming more aware of it now. First of all, I can give you the advice of don't hurt yourself. The ideas that we were taught, I was convinced that there was going to be a new system, and very quickly came to realize and came to believe that there wasn't. And so, you may be wrong, about these ideas. So, the decision to make a rash decision, it's worth it to slow down and to think about your life and what you want to do, and to think about what this organization really is. And I'd encourage them to do that kind of research before you harm yourself. When I read stories like the thing in Kego Harbor, you just wish that you'd be able to talk to somebody, before they got to that situation, to tell them, just wait, just wait a little while. You're not going to feel the same way. And for people who are depressed, I always say this too. Every day is different. And even though you're depressed, and even though you may be feeling like, there's no new system, whatever, but you're just depressed because you don't have any friends, and you put everything in your life into this organization, and you don't know what to do, you'll feel different. You will feel different, no matter how depressed you are. And then a new day will come, and I can guarantee you that you're not going to feel that way in the future. That things do get better. So just give it time, and yeah, that's it. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying that's good advice. As dark as it may seem, and as hopeless as it may seem, try and get through to the next day, and you may feel completely differently. So
that's right.
Yeah.
I was told that, and it came true. I was told that you just hang on, because even with the prospect of not being a Jehovah's Witness and not believing in it anymore, that can also be a big, downer. That kind of magical thinking can really get you over some hard times, and so you don't have that to rely on anymore, and that can be tough. But I can say that real life and being in real life and knowing what that's like is much better. I feel like I can deal and find true happiness that way, rather than worrying about something that isn't really true.
Indeed. Wise words. Well, Jerry, it's been an absolute thrill to talk to you. Thank you for coming on the John Cedars channel. Viewers, you should check out The Truth on Stitcher with Jerry Minor. It sounds like a fascinating podcast. I intend to check it out myself and see what different versions of the religion celebrities are able to come up with. But Jerry, it's been an absolute joy. I hope we get to meet in person before too long. And again, thank you for joining me. Yeah.
Also wanted to say that congratulate you for what you've done and thank you for what you've done. I think that the way you present things, and I know a lot of people tell you that, look, we all have our methods, and some of us may agree with other methods or not, but I think that you are doing something that does reach a lot of people. There's no discounting that, and however you can reach people and whatever method you can do and however you do that, I think is great. And people like you who take the time to do this, I think need to be commended because I call myself an activist, but I'm an actor. I'm a writer, and I found this to be an interesting story. But there are people who are more dedicated to doing this and getting the word out, and so I applaud you for doing that, and I think that other people should too.
Oh, definitely. Well, you're very kind to say that. And what I always try to say is the upload button works for everybody just the same.
True.
And the more stories we can get out there and the more perspectives we can get out there, the better. Because what resonates for one person won't resonate for someone else, and vice versa. So fantastic. Well, again, thank you so much for joining me. I hope that we get to meet in person before too long. And viewers, I hope you have enjoyed this interview. Please don't forget to subscribe for more interviews. And as always, thank you for watching.